This lesson is a bit of a mixed bag. We need to add 3 small functions to handle 3 different tasks. First, we want to make sure that the main input field works properly if the user should press Enter or Return. Then, we want to update the value of a list item that's being edited. And finally, we want to lay the groundwork for reacting when an item is dragged to a new location. So I thought, who doesn't love a little potpourri every now and then? Let's get started. Here's the index.html file from the Chapter 3 0303 folder. Let's go back down to the bottom of the page to add in our JavaScript code. We already have a mechanism in place to handle the user clicking on the Add to List button. That's all the code that we inserted in the last lesson. But what happens if someone types in a new list item and, naturally, hits Enter or Return? Well, it actually blanks out our existing list at this point. Not what we want to have happen at all. So let's add a little code block that looks for an Enter or Return and deals with it appropriately. We're going to put this within our document ready function, but after the add to list item function. So I'll open up a couple of lines there, and we'll start off with the jQuery $, and then our selector. Make sure we put it in parentheses and single quotes. And this is going to be an input tag with the type equal to double quotes text. And then after the closing parentheses, dot and on. So what we're doing now is setting up the selector for the right kind of input tag, and then look for the key down event. We're using the .on syntax from jQuery that asks for first the event, and we'll use the key down event in single quotes, followed by comma and function, followed by parentheses with the E for error handling inside of that, and then a curly brace to hold our code. Now we'll eventually need to close off the parentheses that we put in right after on, so I'll go ahead and add that in as well as a closing semicolon. I can forget that from time to time, so for me personally it's always good to go ahead and put that down. Next, we'll set up a variable to get the actual character code. We're going to need to use a slightly complex conditional statement to cover all of our bases. So follow along carefully, set the variable to key, and we'll set that equal to e.charCode, short for character code, of course, followed by question mark, and again, e.charCode, colon, and then basically the same thing again, but with key code. Key code, question mark, e.keycode, colon, 0. Close all that off with a semicolon. Now, once we get our key, we check to see if the key is equal to 13. 13 is the value for the enter or the return key. And if we have that, we'll do a couple things. First, we'll stop it from its normal functioning. Then we'll put the focus on the next input field, which happens to be our submit button. And to do that, we'll put in a couple lines of code. First, we'll create a variable called inputs and set that equal to whatever field we're on using the jQuery this operator, followed by a dot closest, another jQuery conceit, within the form, in parentheses, dot find, open parentheses, single quotes, colon, input, colon, visible. Close off your parentheses and the line with a semicolon. Let me scroll us down a little bit here so you can see that easier. Next, we're going to set the focus, as I said. We'll put in our variable name, inputs, where it's equal to inputs.index this plus 1, that moves it out 1, dot focus. All right, that function's complete. Now, we want to handle any edits that we make to our list items. We're going to look for a change event for the class .listItem, which is inside the list. So let's set up our event handler, and I'll start off with pointing to the list as the selector. This is the UL tag that holds all of our list items, and we'll use .on, open a parentheses. The event we're looking for is change, and then we're going to target a specific class within the list, and that's the class of the list item itself, which not coincidentally is called list item, so .list item. And then after that, single quote, another comma, and we open up our function, again with E as the error handler. And let's put our closing curly brace, and after our closing parentheses and semicolon. So now within that function, once this event is triggered, we'll pick up the just entered current value. So this is going to be a variable called current value, and we'll set that equal to this.val. This is the value for the input field that's in the list item that the user is changing. And once we have that, we can swap out the input field's attribute. So again, we'll use the jQuery this, and we want to change an attribute. So we use .attr, open parentheses. What attribute do we want to change? We want to change the one called value. And what do we want to change it to? Our variable current value. Now we need to do it this way rather than just use the jQuery val property to ensure that the DOM is changed, which is critical for saving our list later. Finally, let's make a little bit more room. We're going to create a, for now, empty little function that checks to see if our list has been resorted. We'll need this when it comes time to automatically save our list. This functionality is, frankly, a bit of a bear with the standard drag and drop API, but the HTML5 sortable plugin makes it really straightforward. So it's basically a binding. We'll pinpoint our class of sortable, and then after the parentheses, we're calling the sortable function, and we'll bind that using the sort update event, and we'll set up a function. Again, followed by a curly brace, and then close off that curly brace with the closing parentheses and semicolon. Okay, that's all we need for now. I'll save the page, and in the next lesson, we'll put in the code for removing list items, both individually and collectively.